So this week's Parsha is Parshas Toldos. Toldos literally means generations, offspring. So this week's Parsha opens up, Va'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram hoiledes Yitzchak. These are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram bore, or Avram fathered Yitzchak. So it's understood why it's called, Parsha's name is Toldos. It's the first really unique and memorable word in the Parsha, which is often one of the main reasons behind choice of words in naming a Parsha. We could call it Ve'ela, but Eila is not a particularly unique word. Toldos is a word that is more unique and would allow us to more effectively identify the specific Parsha, so it's called Parshas Toldos. Now, just in this opening pasuk, in the opening verse of this week's Parsha, we're struck right away with a question. Ve'ela Toldos, Yitzchak ben Avram, these are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram hoiledes Yitzchak, Avram bore or fathered Yitzchak. That seems to be redundant. Either one of those two statements didn't need to be there, surely. These are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. If Yitzchak's the son of Avram, that by definition means that Avram fathered Yitzchak, because if Avram didn't father Yitzchak, Yitzchak wouldn't be his son. Right? So why does it say Yitzchak, the son of Avram? Avram fathered Yitzchak. And we know that it's not... The Torah doesn't just say things for fun. Torah doesn't just throw in extra words just because, unless there's a specific reason, unless there's a purpose in adding in those words. We know that there are halachas that are learnt literally from having an extra letter or a missing letter, writing the word with or without a vav or a yud where it could have been the other way. So if we have a whole extra phrase here that seems to be redundant and doesn't seem to tell us anything new, we've got to stop and wonder why. Why did the Torah put in a whole phrase here that seems to just be effectively repetitive, which would make it redundant? Now, it's obviously not redundant. We know that at the outset. The question is, why not? So there are a number of different explanations that are offered. One of them, this is mentioned somewhat in Gemara, in Midrashim. Rashi quotes it on this verse in his commentary, that, thank you very much, that remember that at the time that Yitzchak was born, Avram was 100 years old. Sarah was 90. They'd been married for decades and not had children together. Now, we recently just had this story where Sarah was taken to live with Avimelech, the king of the Plishtim, and she was there for a while. Now we know that he didn't touch her, but everybody else didn't necessarily know that. So then Avimelech found out she was Avram's wife. He said, "I'm sorry, take her back, go." And that was the end of that. But now just imagine that Avram and Sarah have been married together for decades, not had a child together. Sarah goes into the palace of Avimelech for a short period of time, and then a while later she has a baby. What do you think people are saying?
It's not his
right?
baby.
So that's why Hashem made sure that Yitzchak looked very much like Avram. Now, every child carries the genes of both of their parents. 50% of the genetic makeup of every child is from the genetic makeup of the father, 50% is from the mother. That's the way it works. But not necessarily do we always see it. Some genes are stronger than others. Sometimes a child will have the hair color of the mother rather than the father, or vice versa. Eye color, bone structure, facial features. It's not necessarily always readily apparent. Now, if you were to do genetic testing, you would be able to see that, yes, the genes of this child align perfectly with the genes of this man, and therefore we have evidence of the fact that he's a father, genetically. But that doesn't mean that they have to necessarily look the same. So Hashem made sure that in this case, Yitzchak would not only carry 50% of the genetic material of Avram, but that would be arranged in a way that Yitzchak would actually look like Avram, very much, have a very strong resemblance. I just had a story a few weeks ago. I met someone, I was teaching a class somewhere, and I met with one of the administrators of the school, to discuss the class that I was teaching, and I got home and I said to my wife, you know what, it's so funny, she reminds me so strongly of so-and-so, this other lady who happens to be a relative of mine through marriage. And my wife said, yeah, well, that's probably because they're sisters. Right? And I had no idea, and they don't necessarily look exactly the same, but just the mannerisms, the way they carried themselves, the way they spoke, there was just such a strong resemblance. You know, it's very easy to say, oh, she just looks just like her sister. I had no idea that they were related, but the resemblance was so strong that I said to my wife, she reminds me of so-and-so, without even knowing they were sisters. Right? So Hashem ensured that the genetic makeup of Yitzchak would be arranged. The genes that Yitzchak inherited from Avram worked in such a way that he actually had a very, very strong resemblance to Avram. And that way, when people saw Yitzchak, there was no doubt about who his father was. And that's why it says these are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. And just by the way, in case you have a question about who actually fathered Yitzchak, Avram Holidus Yitzchak. Everybody knew that Avram fathered Yitzchak. There was no question about it. Hashem had ensured that things worked out in a way that there was no room for doubt about who actually fathered Yitzchak. So that's one explanation about what happened here. Why it says, these are the generations of Yitzchak, son of Avram, because Yitzchak was the son of Sarah and her husband was Avram, so she's the son of Avram. He's the son of Avram. But then the Pasuk says, just so you should know that he was actually the son of Avram, everyone could tell that Avram fathered Yitzchak because they looked extremely similar. The resemblance was undeniable. That's one explanation of why the Pasuk says this, and now we understand already why it's no longer redundant.
Why, like, we know, like, it's, like, I get that the nations needed to be convinced, because it's, like, Sarah, so old, whatever, but, like, why do we need to be told twice? Like, we know.
Well, okay, that's a fair question. The Torah is telling us about the events. The Torah is telling us that, by the way, you should know that that everybody agreed once seeing Yitzchak, once they saw Yitzchak, everyone acceded to the fact that Avram had fathered Yitzchak. So the Pasuk's not to tell us, because we already know, right? We already understand that. But the Pasuk's telling us about what happened. This is, telling us about the story, the history of these events. And the Torah is telling us that, by the way, you should know, it was readily apparent that Avram fathered Yitzchak, and therefore everybody knew. It's not coming to convince us, it's telling about the fact that everybody else was convinced.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Why did Lot look like Avram?
Wait, did he?
Yeah, Lot. He also looked like Avram.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer off the top of my head. Sorry. Don't have all the answers. It very possibly says somewhere, I just can't think of anything off the top of my head. Anything else before we go further? No? Okay. So, another answer that's given, this is a really nice one. Not that the other one's not really nice, but this one's kind of, I guess we could say this one's like really sweet. We're told that Avram and Yitzchak, each was the other's claim to fame. So Avram's claim to fame was Yitzchak. He was so proud of Yitzchak. He was so proud of the person that Yitzchak grew to be, that his claim to fame was, I am Yitzchak's father. You want to know who I am? It wasn't like, I'm Avram. Hoo-hoo. His claim to fame was, I am Yitzchak's father. You know Yitzchak, that guy Yitzchak? I'm his father. And Yitzchak was so proud of Avram that his claim to fame was he was Avram's son. So each one, the Pasuk tells us both ways. Eila told us Yitzchak ben Avram. These are the generations of Yitzchak. Who was Yitzchak? Yitzchak was the son of Avram. His claim to fame was, I am Avram's son. You know that guy Avram? I'm his son. Yeah. And Avram did the same thing. Avram, Holidus Yitzchak. When Avram wanted to identify himself, he said, I'm Yitzchak's father. I'm the guy that fathered Yitzchak. You know that guy Yitzchak? Yeah, I'm his father. So that's another reason why the Pasuk, the Torah tells us about both directions, because each of these was a statement that was made. Avram made this statement, I am Avram, the father of Yitzchak. Yitzchak made the statement, I am Yitzchak, the son of Avram. The third explanation, and this is one that we're going to dig into a little more, and that is that it is said, we're told in Sifrei Kabbalah, in Zohar, and in other places, that Avraham represented and was the embodiment of Midas HaChesed. Midas HaChesed, what does it necessarily mean, but in this context, what it refers to is the divine attribute of kindness, Hashem's attribute of kindness. And then there's Midas HaGvura, the attribute of strength, of demandingness, of severity, and in this context, we're talking about this divine attribute of strength and being demanding. And that was something that Yitzchak embodied, Yitzchak represented. Now, with Avram, we see it really very plainly. We see Avram was always giving. Avram had set up this tent. We talked 2 weeks ago. Was it last week? Anyways, recently about Avram, he set up this Eshel, this whatever it was, whether it was a tree, it was a tent, it was a place to provide the needs of people. Avram set up this big tent in the middle of the desert. It had an opening on every direction, so no matter which direction someone was coming from, they would feel welcome to come in. Avram loved taking care of people, giving to people, teaching, educating, giving very basic food and drink, not just spiritual needs. Avram was a giver. Avram loved giving. Avram was the embodiment of chesed. And it's actually told that this divine attribute of chesed, okay, so just to back up to give a little bit of context, what I mean when I say divine attribute of chesed, what does this mean? So we have, each of us has, or not has, we are an entity, right? I am me, you are you, and that's true of each of us. If you close your eyes and think about, just for a second, me, who am I? When someone says you doesn't refer to your hands or your feet or your face or your personality. It's you. It's your essence. It's your soul. You know, when someone asks you, people generally point in here, right? Inside, pointing inwards at the soul. This, not me, right? Me, you, inside, who you are. Then you have the attribute, you have your personas, you have the way you behave. And the evidence of the fact that the way you behave and your characteristics are not who you are is that under different circumstances we behave differently. Right? There's nothing wrong with that, it's just the reality. The persona that I carry, the way that I behave when I'm teaching a class is very different to the way that I behave when I'm doing research behind my desk. It's different to the way I behave when I'm responding to comments on Instagram. It's different to the way that I behave when I'm hugging my daughter when I get home. It's different to the way that I behave when I'm telling my daughter off and disciplining her. It's different to the way I behave when I'm speaking to my wife over dinner. Right? Each of these scenarios is, I'm going to have a different persona in each scenario. And appropriately so, because they're different situations that require different kinds of interaction. Now, it's the same me, right? It's not a different person. And it's not a lie. I'm behaving in a way that's appropriate for the situation. I'm not supposed to behave in this classroom as a teacher the way that I behave when I'm telling my daughter off for being disrespectful. Or the way that I behave when I'm commending her for doing the right thing and behaving in a way that was impressive and that I know that she worked hard to do, even though it was hard for her. Right? Each of these scenarios requires a different kind of behavior. So we have personas, we have operational modes that we employ in different scenarios. That's not who we are. I am the same me. I am experiencing each of these scenarios. That's me. And I am behaving and acting in each scenario, but I'm using a different set of tools in each scenario. I'm employing a different persona. Right? So now, on the part of the Creator, on the part of divinity, there is the Creator. The Creator is infinite. When we say that the Creator is infinite, it doesn't mean just quantitatively infinite, infinite in size. It means qualitatively infinite. The Creator cannot be defined. As soon as I try to define the Creator, say the Creator is, as soon as I use any adjective to describe the Creator, I am saying the Creator is this, whatever adjective I choose to use, which means the Creator is not something else, which means I have defined and limited the Creator. So the Creator is undefinable. At the same time as the Creator is undefinable, the Creator itself is neither kind nor strict, because kind means not strict and strict means not kind. The Creator is qualitatively infinite, undefinable. At the same time, the Creator has personas, has behavioral modes with which the Creator operates, similarly to the way that we behave with different personas. And this ties into the various names of the Creator. right? Just going back to the analogy, this is the first time I've used this analogy a lot, but it's the first time it's been about me. I have to be a little more careful. I usually use it about some random person with an arbitrary name. But I get called Rabbi Glick generally when I'm teaching the class. I get called Tati by my kids. I get called Strolik by my parents. That's a secret. Nobody knows that except for my parents and siblings, right? I get called Sruli by people who know me, friends who know me from high school. I get called Yisrol by acquaintances who know me from the last 10, 12 years because I kind of changed the name that I prefer primarily. I get called by different names by different people. Now, if I'm walking down the street and I hear someone call out from behind me, and I hear someone say, "Hey, Rabbi Glick," before I even stop and think, I know it's a student. I know it's someone I teach in one of the classes that I teach. Or someone who's seen me on Facebook and is calling me as a teacher. Someone whose classes they've attended in person, seen on Facebook, seen on YouTube. So I know that this person is a student, and when I turn around to see who it is, I'm already turning around with a certain persona, because by calling me Rabbi Glick, they've elicited that part of my personality. So I'm turning around in Rabbi Glick mode. If I'm walking down the street and I hear a little voice call out, "Tati," I know it's one. I might not realize within a split second whether it's my elder daughter or my... Well, I know it's not my younger daughter because she doesn't use that kind of vocabulary yet. I don't know if it's my daughter or my son, who's still 2 and has a pretty squeaky voice, right? So I don't know which it is, but I know it's one of my kids, and I'm going to be turning around in parent mode, not in Rabbi Glick mode, not in teacher mode. If I hear someone say Srolik, I know it's one of my parents. If I hear someone say, "Hey, Sruli," I know it's someone who knows me for more than 10 years, right? So before I even stop and think, who is that voice? Before I even consciously realize which name they called me, there's a certain part of me that's been called out by this name, because this name refers to a certain persona. And this is true of the discussion we see about different names of Hashem. There's the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, name Avaya. There's Elohim, there's Kel, etc. There are all these different names. When we talk about the names being associated with Chesed, with Gvura, with different things, this is what it means. There is the Creator itself, which is undefinable. Then the Creator has attributes. There is kind mode, kindness. That is not the Creator, that is the Creator's behavioral mode. That is the Creator's kind persona. Then there is the Gvura, the strength, the demanding persona. When we want to elicit the kind persona, we use one name. When we want to elicit the persona of strength, we use another name, because those names are associated with different personas and call out and elicit different personas or behavioral modes. So when we say chesed, midas ha-chesed, the attribute of kindness, this is not referring to the Creator. It is a persona of the Creator, a behavioral mode. It's a tool that the Creator employs to interact in a mode of kindness. Gvura is the attribute of strength. This is a tool that the Creator employs to interact in a mode of strength. Now, it actually says that when Avram was born and started living his life, the divine attribute of kindness actually turns around to the Creator and says, "Hey, what's the deal? I've become redundant. There is an individual on planet Earth who is actually personifying my role to the extent that I don't even need to be here anymore." So Avram embodied this divine attribute of kindness. Avram lived a life of giving, of providing, physically and spiritually. Food, bread, meat. People came to his tent. He got them to bathe, to get clean, to get fresh, to get comfortable. Fed them, gave them to drink. Provided for their spiritual needs as well. He was a giver. He embodied this divine attribute of kindness. Yitzchak embodied the divine attribute of Gvura. Gvura generally is translated as strength. We associate it, think of it as being strict. Now, strength is something that tends to kind of have perhaps somewhat of a negative association, but we're not talking about something negative. We're talking about this divine attribute of strength. It's something that's divine. It's something that's good. So what does it mean? What's this strength? We're not talking about someone who says no as opposed to saying yes. You come and you want something, and Avram says, "Yes, I'll give you," and Yitzchak says, "No, I'm not giving you because I'm Gvura, I'm strength, I'm mean." We're not talking about being nasty. right? We're talking about divine strength. So what does it mean? We give an analogy of a teacher. You can have a teacher who likes to provide information. Now, we may think that that's the role of a teacher, to provide information. It's not really, though, and we can appreciate this today more than ever. Because you don't really need teachers to get information today. All you need is a phone in your pocket, you whip it out, you ask Google a question, you get an answer. You get more information from Google, from Wikipedia, and other sources than any teacher alive will be able to give you. Whatever the most knowledgeable person on earth knows, Google knows more, guaranteed. Right? So now, there may be an individual who can take you deeper into a certain specialty than what you can find available on Google, but there's no one who can give probably a billionth of what you can find on Google. So teachers are not there necessarily per se to give information, but one of the things that we would associate with the role of a teacher is to give information. You have a teacher who gives information, who teaches, who gives. You ask a question, the teacher gives an answer. And students in this class are going to walk out with a tremendous amount of information because the teacher gives information, gives information, gives information. And at the end of the year, if the children, if the exams at the end of the year in this class are designed to really offer students the opportunity to demonstrate how much knowledge they've acquired, you will look at those exams and see that these students have acquired a ridiculous amount of information because they have a teacher who just excels at giving them information. And the children come out knowing a lot. Then you have a teacher that when the student asks a question, the teacher says, well, I want you to think about what you're asking. And then I want you to think about how you can maybe go about coming up with an answer. What information do you need to find to get an answer? Go see what information you can get. Think about it. Dig into it. Break it down. See whether you have further questions that require you to look somewhere else and look up more. Think about it and see if you can find the answer. Come back to me at the end of the week and tell me what you've managed to find. Now, at the end of the year, the students in this second class are going to have far less information. But I can tell you two things. Number one is, in 5 years, the students in this class are going to remember what they learned far better than the students in the first class. Certainly in 20 years. Second of all, the students in the second class are going to be able to find answers to their questions more effectively than the students in the first class. The students in the first class are going to walk away, and if that's the last year of school and they never have a class again, when they get stuck for a question, they're not going to know what to do. Right? Today they can Google, but even with Google, some people can Google better than others, right? So if you have a teacher who's taught you how to do research, how to get your own answer, you're going to have less information, but the information that you have is going to be your own. You acquired it. You connect with it personally, and you will be able to do it better yourself in the future. And this is now, and both have advantages. Neither is necessarily better or worse. Each one has something that it offers that the other doesn't. Each has a shortcoming that the other doesn't have. And I guess ideally, the hypothetical, perfectly ideal teacher would be someone who can really balance both most effectively. But anyways, that's not really the point of discussion. So each of these approaches giving. Now, and the second teacher is Gvura, it's strength. I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm going to demand of you that you provide the answer. Now, I'll help you, I will coach you, but I'm not going to give it to you. You get the answer. I'm going to demand of you that you find the answer. Now, Avram, we understand why Avram embodied chesed, because he was always giving. We are told in Kabbalistic texts that Yitzchak embodied Gvura, embodied this demanding, this divine persona of being strong and demanding, more disciplined. Where do we see it? And here it's a little interesting. The way that we're told that the anchor in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah in biblical text for this association between Yitzchak and Midas HaGvura is the stories about Yitzchak and the wells. We have the stories about Yitzchak and the wells that he dug, etc. And honestly, we're not told a whole tremendous amount about it. They're relatively brief references. But Yitzchak had these stories with the wells. What's a well? If you came to Avram and wanted a drink of water, he'd say, here's a cup, hold out the cup, I will pour water into your cup. which is quick and easy. You come in thirsty, within seconds your thirst is quenched. You need a second cup, a third cup, it'll keep pouring till you've had enough. At the same time, when Avram goes to sleep at night and you don't know where he keeps the pitchers of water, you don't know where the well is that he got the water from, you're going to stay thirsty. If you come to Yitzchak and you want to drink, he's not going to quench your thirst. He's not just going to pour a cup of water for you. He's going to dig a well with you. He's going to teach you how to dig a well. When you dig a well, it takes time. It's not chesed. It's not pouring a cup into your water. What are you doing? You're not digging a hole and pouring water into the hole, because if you're going to do that, you might as well just pour it into a cup. There's no point. The idea of a well is you dig and dig and dig until your hole reaches the water table, and until you reach a natural source of water. Then, once you've connected this cavity in the ground, this hole, with a source of water, the water seeps up. So what you've done is dug and dug and dug until you accessed the water that's already there, allowed it to come up, and now you have a lasting supply of water. That's gvura, that's strength. Digging down to uncover what's there. It's harder work. It takes longer. You don't quench your thirst immediately the way that Avram does. At the same time, and now taking this back to the analogy of a student and a teacher, right? This is what the teacher's done. The teacher's dug into the student, dig a well. Dig until the student uncovers what they have inside, their own ability to find answers, to provide answers, to get answers. It's a lot more work. There's a lot less information at the end of the day, but this student, number one, is they connected because it was their own answer. It's not an answer that you gave them, and that as soon as they forget the moment at which you gave them the answer, they've forgotten the answer. It's gone, or maybe they remember the answer for a bit longer until they forget that. When you've dug and made them dig in themselves and bring out the ability that they had to provide an answer, and they found the answer on their own, that answer belongs to them. It's their own. It's part of who they are. They have a much stronger connection with it. It's going to remain forever, and they will be able to replicate it. Because you've dug deep into who they are and the abilities that they have. That's gevura, that's strength. And this was the expression of this that we have biblically is the stories of Yitzchak and the wells that were dug, because the well really is an excellent analogy or metaphor for this divine attribute for strength and what it means. Or one of the things that it means and represents. So Avram embodied this divine attribute of kindness, of chesed, and Yitzchak embodied this divine attribute of gvura. And they're both very important. And this pasuk, this verse is telling us, Eila Toldos, Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram holedes Yitzchak. These are 4 stages. We have Yitzchak, which is gvura, ben Avram, chesed, Avram, Chesed, Holedes Yitzchak, Gvura. So we have Gvura, Chesed, Chesed, Gvura. Yeah. Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram, Holedes Yitzchak. So the order of the names is Yitzchak, Avram, Avram, Yitzchak. Gvura, Chesed, Chesed, Gvura. Now, there's an expression that says, Ein korin la'avos ela l'shlosha, it says in Gemara. The only people that we refer to as avos, as the forefathers of our people, of the Jewish people, are 3 people, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. What about the 12 tribes? Well, the 12 tribes aren't the forefathers of... Well, collectively they are the forefathers of the entire Jewish people, but none of them individually is the forefather of all the Jewish people. Each of them is the forefather, the progenitor of their tribe. The only people that are the progenitors, the forefathers of the entire Jewish people are Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's why it says, Ein korin la'avos ela shlosha. There are only 3 people who get the title forefather of the Jewish people. 3 people, forefathers. If that's confusing, it's F-O-R-E, not F-O-U-R. There are 4 foremothers, but 3 forefathers. So, Abba Imahot. So there's F-O-U-R, F-O-R-E. When we say forefathers, it's clearly not F-O-U-R, it's F-O-R-E, forefathers. These are the progenitors, the ancestors of the entire Jewish people. Now there's something else that this means also. Each of the tribes, each of the sons of Yaakov represents a different path, a different approach in serving Hashem. And not necessarily are all of them for everybody, right? We're all different. Everyone in this room is different. Every one of us is unique. Every one of us has different gifts, different talents, different strengths, and different weaknesses, right? None of us is just perfectly good at everything. And that's really where teamwork, the power of teamwork, comes into play, right? You want to form a team, you want to get something done, whether it's a business, a charity, a sports team, whatever it is. If you assemble a collection of people that all have the same strengths, there's not really all that much point in having a team, except for the fact that you have more people. Right? In a sports team, in any sport, there are different roles that need to be played. I'm not hugely into sport. I'm not going to start picking out all the different roles, but if you break it down generally, you have the offensive role on a team and the defensive role. Right? Now, there are people whose talents predispose them to being really good at offensive play, and there are people whose talents predispose them to being very good at defensive play. And it's not just their talents, it's their physical build, etc. Right? So if you want to have a really good team, you want to have the right selection of people so that each role can be played most effectively. If you're running a business, you don't just, right, sales, generally speaking, in a generic business, sales are really important. You need to make sales, you need to get customers, you need to make sales because sales generate revenue, and revenue allows for profit, and that's what businesses are for. At the same time, if you just get a team of salesmen and you have no accounting department, you have no buying department, you have no one running and organizing things, you're going to have a whole lot of customers who want to buy, you're going to have nothing to sell them. You're going to have no system in place to run the business, right? You have to have buyers, you have to have sellers. Their roles are opposite. The role of a buyer is to spend money, bringing in goods. The role of a seller is to get rid of goods and bring money in. Opposite roles, but when they're there synergistically and each one is doing their role properly, you can have an effective business with all the other roles together. But these are the two generic opposite roles that work together to make an effective business to an extent. Right? So chesed and gvura are both things that... so here it says, Ein kohen la'aves ela l'shloisha. These three aves, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, were the forefathers of every single Jew. And the behaviors, the divine attributes that they embodied are for everyone. The specific paths of Yehuda and Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yisachar, Zvulun, Yosef, Binyamin, they're not necessarily for everyone. They're different paths and they're not for everybody. But the divine attributes that were embodied by Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were for everybody. And that's why it says, Ein kohen la'aves ela l'shloisha. These three are the forefathers, the progenitors of every Jew, and the divine attributes, the behaviors that they personified and excelled in are for all of us. Now the balance is going to be different for each of us. But each of them are for everybody. Chesed, each of us has to employ chesed. Each of us has to employ gvura. And we saw this actually last week when we were talking about why was it that Sarah was chosen specifically as the person about whom the Torah told us that Hashem makes the days of those who are complete. Hashem makes the days complete. Sarah and Avram together were a team, and the Torah tells us Avram Zokein Bava Yomim. Right? Avram Zokein, he acquired Zeshakona Chachma. In terms of his incoming, his responsibility for self-development and advancing himself, he maxed out. Also in terms of Bava Yomim, of bringing it, of delivering value to the universe, to Hashem, to the world, he maxed that out too. He balanced the opposites, which was why it's not just called a tzaddik, he was called complete Tomim, Avram and Sarah, who were a team. Right? So ultimately, we have to do both. Now, we don't always have to do the same balance of both when it comes to chesed and gvura. Avram was known primarily for chesed. At the same time, Avram was ready and able to employ the attribute, the behavioral mode, the persona of gvura as necessary. Now, again, bringing it back to us. Each of us has different natures, different predispositions, different things that we're gifted with. And if one person's gifted with the ability to be a phenomenal communicator, it would make sense for them to focus their energy on communicating, on teaching, on educating. There are a lot of things that the gift of communication can be really used for in a positive way. Should this person also give charity? Yes. Should this person position themselves as the go-to person for people who need charity? Not necessarily, because a lot of the things that the gift of communication is maxed out with, or used out most effectively for good, are not necessarily things that put the person in a position to be the world's greatest philanthropist. Namely, teaching, for example. If there is someone whose gifts predispose them to really being the world's greatest businessman and generating insane amounts of financial wealth, it wouldn't really be a logical step or a good capitalization of their gifts for them to become a teacher if someone else is a better teacher than they are. It would be a good idea for them to go into business and generate lots of money and make sure that that money is used for good things, and to then make themselves the world's #1 go-to philanthropist for needy people, for needy causes, for places that it actually would be a good idea to make financial charitable contributions. It makes sense for him to focus his energy on doing that rather than teaching. It makes sense for the person who's gifted at communicating to use their gifts for communicating, for teaching, for facilitating communication, for mediating, whatever it is, rather than trying to be a philanthropist, which they may not necessarily be super effective at, right? And if each of us focuses on maxing out our gifts and doing the best we all have different gifts, there will be a synergistic society where there are people who are fulfilling different roles, each doing the role that they are best suited to do, and society will be very efficient, and things would work well, hypothetically, if we didn't get confused and do the thing that so-and-so is doing because it gets them really good, high-profile profile on Instagram, right? So if each of us focused on trying to maximize the gifts that we have and use them for good, society would have a lot of different roles fulfilled effectively, and that would be fantastic. At the same time, the teacher still has to give charity, just not as much as the person whose gifts predispose them to amassing a wealth in the trillions of dollars and being able to give billions of dollars to charity. And so here is where things get delicate and the discussion becomes a bit grey. Right? Avram and Yitzchak Avram. There's a balance. We have to have Kohen Avos Elul Shlosha. Not every role is for everybody. But the midos, the divine attributes that were embodied by the Avos, by the fathers, were for everybody. Chesed is for everybody. Gvura is for everybody. But the balance is different. For someone who has an incredibly sensitive, caring, empathetic personality, it makes sense for them to focus primarily on things that would generally be described as chesed, as kindness, as giving, dealing with people, things that require sensitivity and empathy and kindness, because that would be something that they would excel at doing. Whether it's being a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, a counselor, even a teacher. Did I say that already? Okay, so I just did. Right? So the kinds of things where being a sensitive, empathetic person comes into play, the therapist, would be a good idea for this person to go into one of those careers because they do well, and that these are things that society needs. This person will be able to fulfill those needs of society well, effectively. If someone has a very disciplined nature and has the ability to make decisive decisions and knows when to say no and knows how to decide, is this an efficient direction to go in or not? Is this an effective allocation of resources or not? This person would do well to be an administrator rather than a therapist. Generally speaking, not saying that someone who can make decisions shouldn't be a therapist, but generally speaking, someone who has a more stern nature and knows when to say no, that's not the right way of going about this. That's not the most effective, most efficient path to take. We should do this differently. This should be the person sitting behind the desk making executive decisions. This should be the person sitting behind a desk making a schedule, deciding how resources are allocated, etc. Now, does the person who has this decisive, strong personality need to be empathetic and kind as necessary? Yes. If this person meets someone, has a friend, bumps into someone on the street randomly, sits next to someone on the subway who's in tears and needs some support because they just went through a tragedy, just went through some difficult time, should they say, I'm sorry, this is not an effective allocation of resources? Hopefully not. What they should do is do their best to be provide a shoulder for support, to listen, to be empathetic, to be sensitive, to be kind, right? And if this person who's kind and sensitive and empathetic is in a situation where someone comes along and says, like, I really want to do this, do you think it's a good idea? And they know it's a bad idea, they shouldn't say, yeah, you should really do that. It's going to feel amazing for me to say yes. Because it's going to feel amazing for that person when you say yes. Yes, it's not going to feel amazing for them tomorrow when they find out that it was a really bad idea. Right? It's going to feel much better for them tomorrow when they've taken a different course of action because you informed them sensitively of the fact that, no, this isn't a good use of resources, this isn't a good path for you to take, I really think it would be in your best interest to take a different path. Say it as sensitively and empathetically as possible, but tell them what they need to hear. Right? So people who are primarily associated with the attribute of kindness should focus on that and max that out, but still have to employ gvura, strength, decisiveness, demandingness as necessary. People whose nature is primarily decisive, demanding, strong, should put themselves in a position where they can max those out and use them productively as well as possible, but also have to be able to be empathetic and kind as necessary. So that's why the avos, ein kohen la'avos ela l'shloisha, these avos are for everybody. We all have to learn from Avram to have chesed. We all have to learn from from Yitzchak to have gvura. We have to be decisive and strong as necessary. We have to have discipline as necessary. We have to be able to say no both to ourselves and to other people as necessary. We also have to be kind and empathetic as necessary. These are things that everybody has to have, and the balance will vary. But we have to have all of them. And when the Pasuk tells us, this is why the Gemara says, Ein kohen la'avos ela l'shloisha. Now, getting back to the Pasuk, which is really the focus, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that, even though it's not necessarily per se the actual topic of discussion on the verse, because I think it's something that's really important. We all have to take both of these and use them as necessary. At the same time, it's effective and efficient to be self-aware about which ones we might more effective at, which ones we're more passionate about, and it makes sense. It's a good decision to try and spend our life focusing primarily on those because we're likely to be better at it and to be more productive based on that decision. And productivity is a good thing. It's not necessarily a good thing to make productivity and measurable output the be-all and end-all of life. That can become very unhealthy, but it's a good idea to try to be productive also. So that's that. Now, coming back to chesed and gvura, so what we talked about now was kindness, chesed, and gvura, strength. Now, these are also associated with emotions. The emotions that are Kabbalistically associated with chesed, kindness, and gvura, strength, are love and fear, respectively. Right? Chesed is giving, openness, connection, which is what love is about. Gvura is strength, it's limiting, it's defining, which is more associated with fear. Fear, no, that's bad. Define that as bad. Stay away. And when it comes to Ava and Yira, love of Hashem and fear of Hashem, we have to have both. But it's also important to be aware of the fact that there are different kinds. And different, what we could call levels or stages, and they're both important. Each has a role to play. There's what's called Yira Tata, the lower level of Yira, of fear of Hashem. And we talk about love and fear, primarily the focus is going to be love of God and fear of God. So in fear of God, right, Yira Shamayim, fear of heaven, is known to be a positive attribute. What does that really mean? So there are generally two broad, general stages, levels, categories of fear of Hashem. There's what's called Yira Tata'a, the lower, tata is Aramaic, the lower level of fear. And yira ila'a, the higher level of fear. Yira tata, the lower level of fear, is more literally fear, right? If I believe that the Creator exists and the Creator creates everything and decides what happens, is the boss at the end of the day of everything, the deciding factor behind everything, it makes sense to be concerned about the Creator's disposition towards us. And if I know that the Creator wants me to do A and doesn't want me to do B, if I know that the Creator wants me to eat kosher food and not eat not kosher food, and I believe that the Creator decides everything that happens to me, decides my health, decides my income, everything, my relationships, whatever it is, my happiness, not to say that we don't have the ability to make contributions towards those things, but the Creator certainly decides what we are, the quota that we're able to reach if we put in the effort. It's kind of a good idea to say, for example, eat kosher food and not eat not kosher food. Why? Because frankly, I don't want the Creator to do bad things to me. I'm scared. I'm scared of the bad things the Creator can do to me. That makes sense. It's logical. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, we can all agree that that's not the ideal relationship we should have with the Creator, but it's very real. And honestly, for that to be a real thing, to have that level of faith and belief and to be that in touch with it, that we're actually scared of the Creator and the outcomes of our actions, honestly speaking, that's a pretty advanced state of connectedness to our faith and belief in the Creator. That's the truth. It's a pretty admirable state to be in. At the same time, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's a lower level of fear. What's yira ilah, the higher level of fear? The higher level of fear, when we talk about yira ilah, I would actually remove the word fear and replace it with the word awe. And by awe, because I'm Australian, I have to let you know, I mean A-W-E, not O-R, and not O-R-E. Right? Awe. Awe. Right? Awesome. God is awesome. What does awesome mean? What is awesome? Awesome is A-W-E-S-O-M. Or awful. Awful also means horrific. Horrific. Horror. Fear. Right? Awesome, really, it's like awesome. What does awesome actually mean? It means something that is so great that its magnitude, its greatness is something that we are in awe of. Right? Awesome means amazing, great, literally what it means. Fantastic. That's where the word evolves from, I guess. But what awesome, A-W-E, sim, actually means is something that is so great that we are in awe of it. So, yira ilah is not just being afraid of what's going to happen to me based on God's disposition towards me. As a result of that fear, I then behave the way that I'm supposed to. Yira ilah, the higher level of fear, of yira, is that I am in awe of God. I get to a level of appreciation for what God is and for what God does and for the greatness of the universe, and not just the material universe, the spiritual universes, and everything that exists and God's role in all of that. I'm in awe of God. I'm embarrassed to do the wrong thing. I can ask a question. Hopefully everybody here, I hope, has someone that they know that if you were doing something that you know this person expects better of you, and they would expect you not to do this, and you're doing it and they walk in the room, you'd be embarrassed. Right? Certainly as children, it's parents, right? When a young child is doing something and the parent told them not to do it, and the parent walks in, I guess for a young child, a really young child, there's the fear of getting in trouble. For a bit of an older child, for a teenager, even an adult child, right? Adult child, not child as in state of development, but child as in a son or daughter of a parent. As an adult, we still naturally like to please our parents in a healthy relationship. And we don't like to displease our parents. We don't like to disappoint our parents. And if we're doing something and our parent walks into the room and we know that they're going to be disappointed, it's not a good feeling when they walk in. Right? So, and it could be the same for a close friend. It could be the same for a mentor. A mentor, like a real mentor in an ideal mentor relationship, it should be someone that we really respect and want to do our utmost to, to follow their guidance, and someone who we want to impress, not because we want to impress them, but because they are important to us. If they walk in and see that we're doing something that they just told us not to do, we'd be embarrassed because of our respect for them. So if we have Yira Ilah, we are in awe, AWE, of the Creator, that's going to control our behavior on a much deeper level than just being in fear. Because the sense of fear is going to come and go. Also, when things are going well, we tend to think less about things going wrong. It's just human nature, right? On a good day, we don't tend to think as much about things going wrong. And we're not going to be as concerned about what's going to happen to us if we do the wrong thing. If we have such a deep appreciation for the Creator that we are in awe of the Creator, that's going to affect not only it's going to affect the way we behave, the way we think, the way we interact with people on a very deep level. It's going to change our mood even. And that's the ideal state of fear of heaven, of Yiras Shamayim. Not fear, but awe. We're afraid to do the wrong thing because we're ashamed to do that in the presence of the Creator, who is everywhere and in whose presence we are always. And the same is true of love of Hashem, of love of the Creator. There are lower levels and higher levels. There's the love or the interest in what the Creator can do for us, and the interest in doing things to please the Creator because of what we want the Creator to do for us. Avazuta, a lower level, a smaller level of love for God. And then there's Avarabba, a greater level, a love that has the magnitude of this love and appreciation for God is just on a whole different scale. And here we don't just love the Creator for what the Creator can and does do for us. We love the Creator for the Creator. We want desperately to please the Creator, not because of the value we'll get out of it, but because we want to make the Creator happy. So having this level of love and appreciation for the Creator and this level of awe of the Creator is the ultimate, is ideal. At the same time, it's possible that there may be a person or two on planet Earth who's not quite up to that yet. And in case you happen to know someone, one of those one or two possible people who may not be up to that yet, you can let them know it's okay. Having the earlier stages, lower levels of love and fear of God are also important. They are step one by means of which we can get to step two. They are the earlier stage that allows us to achieve a certain level of spiritual advancement, progress, evolution that allows us to be in a position to move on to stage number two. And this is why the Pasuk tells us, Eile Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram Holedes Yitzchak. We need to have both. It's important to be aware that both are very real, both are very valuable. Yes, the higher levels of both, they're called higher because they are. They're more advanced. It's more ideal to be at that stage. But the lower level, the earlier stage, is also real and is also truly, absolutely, objectively, intrinsically valuable. Not just because it's a stepping stone to get to step number two. They are intrinsically valuable in and of themselves, and they are objectively valuable. And if we're not there yet, working to get there is also important. It's also valuable. It's also admirable. And it also brings us a tremendous amount of personal development, spiritually, even emotionally. And emotionally, I don't mean spiritual emotionally, I mean human, physical emotionally. Emotions aren't technically physical, but anyways, that's another whole can of worms. But we could get carried away, and I'm going to try and have self-control. I'm going to exercise my Midas HaGvura. That's right, let's do some Yitzchak. So, this is why the Pasuk needs to tell us Avram and Yitzchak both twice. Yitzchak, Avram, Avram, Yitzchak. The lower levels of fear and love for Hashem are also real and important. At the same time, there are further stages of both which are even better, and things to aspire to, Avram Holis Etz Yitzchak, the higher levels. Now, that's actually really like a third or a quarter of the text. I'm going to try to do another really important thing in the last 3 minutes that we have that comes from later on. It says in a midrash, there's a midrash that says that Avram represents the soul and Sarah represents the body. So Avram and Sarah are a metaphor for the body and soul. Now, this verse again, going back to what it told us about the fact that there was the potential, and not only the potential, there was an assumption that people made until they actually met Yitzchak. And it says that Avram actually made a big party and invited people so people could come and observe the fact that Yitzchak really was his son, just to put a damper on the gossip. So people are saying, Sarah was unable to get pregnant, to have her needs, the things that she wanted fulfilled by Avram. She had to go to Avimelech to get it. Avram is the soul, Sarah is the body. We may think that the body can't get its needs based on living a life that is mediated and focused around the soul. We can't just focus on Torah and mitzvahs. If we want to have our needs fulfilled, we need to go to Avimelech, we need to go to Pelishtim, we need to go into world and make our focus on worldly matters, make our focus on work, rather than going to work and doing our best at work whilst still having our heart and soul focused on the soul, on God, on spirituality. And that's why it says, Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. Don't make the mistake and think that Avimelech's involved in here. Avraham Hoilides Yitzchak. Yitzchak's the son of Sarah. Where did Sarah, who was the father, who was it by means of which Sarah became pregnant with Yitzchak? Avram Hoilides Yitzchak. The soul, if we focus on the soul, and we live... Now, again, important, as I said before about work, focusing on the soul doesn't mean neglecting the world, doesn't mean shutting out the word, doesn't mean neglecting our responsibilities to ourselves, our friends, our families. It's important to be practical and responsible. At the same time, what's the last thing on our minds as we close our eyes at night? What's the first thing on our mind when we open our eyes in the morning? That doesn't need to be work. That doesn't need to be marketing and sales, etc. That needs to be God. Purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to achieve? Soul. That should be the focus. That should be the primary thing with which our experience is occupied and focused. Practically speaking, we have to be practical and do what we have to do, go to work, etc., etc., etc. But if we want to know which of these focuses will provide for our needs, look, it's very natural to think that, you know what? I need to really focus on work, on business, on being practical, on all these things. And if it comes at the expense of pursuit of soul matters, whatever, that's life. I've got to do what I've got to do. And this is what it says, that people were saying, Avimelech nisabra Sarah. Sarah, the body got pregnant from Avimelech. The body has its needs fulfilled by getting super focused and primarily occupied with matters of the world, of Pelishtim, of negativity. And the Pasuk says, no, big mistake, Avraham Hoilides Yitzchak. Sarah became pregnant and had a son Yitzchak from Avram. The needs of the body will be fulfilled and taken care of, at least as effectively, by remaining focused on the soul, on matters of the soul, on the needs of the soul, on our purpose. Purpose is, to an extent... Well, I'm not going to say what I was going to say, actually, because it's not technically precise. I don't want to say something even if it's kind of true, if it's not precisely correct. We can focus on the soul, we can focus on our purpose, why we're here, on God, on the purpose of existence, and on matters of the soul, on Torah, on mitzvahs, on spirituality, and stay focused on that, and do what we have to do, but remember that our focus and our purpose is soul, God, purpose of existence, purpose of creation. And may Avraham Hoilides Yitzchak. Avram, the soul, when our focus on the soul will not be an impediment to the body having its needs fulfilled. Sitting at home on the couch with our feet up may be an impediment to having the needs of our bodies fulfilled. But doing what we got to do, but still remaining focused on the needs of the soul and allowing the needs of the soul to be the primary focus, that will not get in the way of having the needs of our bodies fulfilled. Avram Hoilides Yitzchak. And Mitzvah Hashem, we'll see you all next week.